Okay, we have 2 more speakers left. We're waiting for the volleyball ref to get here to do the Lund Hansen history. But in the meantime, we have Roxie Sharp to come up and talk. And Roxie, I don't know, might be the only person in the crowd that can say that she's actually willingly even spent the night in the Hat Creek Stage Station, because she used to spend the night with her friends here. So.
Well, I used to get to stay here. We considered it, Link and I decided that it was great. Mom and Dad, our family was split. The big boys were Cody, Leaf, and Tom. They were more responsible than we were. They were better company, evidently, than we were. And Mom and Dad would go places and take them. And they would leave the little kids, which were Link and I, home. And we had a sheep wagon, and we learned to smoke at an early age. And we could slip out to that sheep wagon when Mom and Dad left, because they had a gal working was supposed to help Mom, and she was Indian and she didn't speak any English. And so we slipped out there to have some cigarettes. And it was pretty cold, so we decided to start a fire. And we couldn't get the fire started, and we were pouring kerosene on it, and we had so much kerosene on it that the matches wouldn't strike. And in the meantime, George showed up. He was supposed to come down and do chores, and then take Link and I back up here. And he opened up the sheep wagon, and we were drenched in kerosene, and sad that we were unsuccessful in having a cigarette. And he was pretty shocked. But he and Elsie were really nice to Link and I for some reason. And in his later years, he came down to the ranch one day, drove down the back way. And he used to come down, and he would fly down, and he would give us kids a ride on the plane, which was great. And he was sitting there, and I said, I never understood why you put up with us, and you took us for flights, and you and Elsie were so nice. And he said, George didn't chuckle much. He just went, huh, didn't you ever think it's because we liked you? That never crossed our minds. So staying with George and Elsie was a treat, because Elsie was a wonderful cook, and she treated us real well. And we got to sleep upstairs, which was interesting because there were squirrels, and they'd stash them. There were a lot of apple trees around here, and they'd stash apples in that chimney, and it would slip down. But then Elsie would make apple jelly and apple pie, so it was a pretty good treat to get to stay here. And one time, Dad was moving cattle to the Lynn place south of town. And he usually took along a couple hired men, not because they were help, but so he'd have a fresh horse. And he had a hired man that was allergic to water, so his saddle was pretty stinky. And they camped here for the night, and George and Elsie had a boxer, and that dog drug off and buried that saddle. It was a pretty rough saddle. But Jeb had talked about the Bryant place, and that always amazed me, how Edward's family was raised. It was tough every day for them. And we lived on the Jensen place for a while. And Gladys and Edith Jensen wanted to go to high school, but the family didn't have the money for it, so they took down 2 houses in Lusk for money, and then they hauled those houses home, And that's where that house came from, was made from those two houses. And you could tell because the upstairs, the windows were one size and the doors were one size. And on the main floor, they were different. And another story I'd like to share was there's a pasture, when you first get on the ranch, it was called the Erdman place. And the Erdman family lived there for a short time. They were married. They had 3 children, and 2 of the kids had passed away, and I have no idea from what. But he was gone, and the youngest child was sick, and he was coughing, possibly like whooping cough. Anyway, she had heard of a wives' tale to mix kerosene and sugar, and that would cut that and help that baby. Well, she gave that to the baby, and he went to sleep. She thought she had killed that child. And it was up the creek from where the main buildings were on the ranch, probably 3/4 of a mile to a mile. And she ate a can of lye and took that baby and walked down, and she died in front of the barn. But that baby, Mrs. Christian, Nellie Christian, lived there at that time. And she took care of the baby because Mr. Erdman, Al Erdman, was gone. He was afraid. He did a lot of freighting. And when he got back, he decided he had had enough. And so he took the boy and moved to Omaha. And I don't believe they ever came back, to my knowledge. But anyway, just a few stories. Thank you.